So today's video is going to be looking at restoring a record number 8 vise. In front of you on the table here we have a disassembled record number 8 vise because I came up with the idea of making this video after I'd already started. So some of the parts have already been cleaned, other parts like the main body on the left hand side is still needing to be cleaned, whereas parts on the right hand side have already started being cleaned. To clean this, so far what I've done is I've taken some of the gunk degreasant that you can see there and coated all of the parts in it and used a wire wheel to go through and remove as much of the debris as possible. It's important for this stage because I want to paint the vise to get rid of all of the grease that will stop the paint sticking to it. I've got some Hammerite Direct on metal paint, so I'm going to be using that when we get round to that stage, but for the moment it's just cleaning, and then what I'll do is I'll throw in some shots of the vise being cleaned using the wire wheel. The issue here with using the screwdriver is whilst it's scratching off the top surface, well, what looks like 3, maybe 4 layers of paint deep, it's also scratching the metal ever so slightly, so I've got to be very careful not to scratch it too much. Although the paint will do a good job of filling in any scratches or gouges that I make, I'd like to reduce the amount I make if all possible. So I've finished-ish clearing up the edges of the vise, or sanding it down with the wire wheel. There's still a few little divots and marks, but not any more that I want to spend a lot of time getting rid of. It's worth mentioning for this you should be wearing eye protection and breathing protection whilst doing this to avoid any fumes being inhalated. So the next stage is to start finishing off and sanding down the wearing faces. So on this vise there's a set up the front, which the front of the jaws sit on, and a very small set on the back that just rests the back of the sliding jaw. I'm just going to sand those down a little bit so that the remainder of the jaw slides a little bit more smoothly on them before painting and reassembling. So what I'm going to do here is take the old jaws and put some sandpaper on them, just because I know they're nice and flat, and just try and sand off just the edges here to try and make a smooth surface. So I'll just do this for a little bit, and I'll carry on doing this off camera, but I'll also do the same on the front here. So again, using the flat side, just back and forwards, circular motions, standard sanding techniques to just try and flatten this out. You can already see, I don't know if you can see it on camera or not, but there's some more prominent wear lines where the weight of the vise, or weight of the jaws at least, has been on them previously. And that's really what I'm trying to do, just sand them down so they're a little bit more polished. I believe I'm using a 400 grit sandpaper at the moment. And I don't think I'll need any finer than that. At the end of the day, it's not a perfect surface, and it's an old vise and it was working fine beforehand. This will just help make everything run a little bit smoother. So I'll carry on with that and bring you back when I'm finished. So now that we've finished wire walling down the parts, I've taken the two smallest parts here, which is the front plate that holds on the quick release mechanism and the quick release handle, and I've kind of prepped them for painting. So the first thing that I've done is I've kind of just gone over once with a cloth just to make sure there's no dust on them. There is still a tiny few specks of paint, but I'm not too fussed about those. As you can tell, it's kind of got a bit of a sheen to it where we've kind of gone down to that base metal. And what I've done is I've kind of marked off all the areas that I don't want to be painted. So these are the critical faces of these two parts. So this handle goes inside this hole. So I've put some paper inside the hole, and I've taped off the shaft of this handle so that no paint gets on them, and everything else is going to be painted with Hammerite blue. I'll just move it into shot bit there. So I've used Hammerite in the past, but not spray paints. So we'll see how this goes. For this, you want to try and do it in a well-ventilated area. The wood that I've got on the base here is sacrificial, so I don't care if it gets muddy or dirty. But I have put down some newspaper just to help hold everything in place. I will have a hunt around in a minute to see if I can find any masking tape, but I'm going to start with the smallest two pieces and see how it goes, and then if I make any mistakes on here, it's not going to be too hard to fix. Okay, so I have been religiously shaking this can for the last 5 minutes, and I think we're ready to go. So, I'm just going to do a test spray. Excellent. And now I'm going to start spraying it. So, I'm just going to go in nice even lines. Allow 15 minutes between coats. So, I'm going to call that here, and then I'll come back after I've done a few. I'm going to do about 3 coats this way. In fact, after the 15 minutes I might flip it over and spray the other side and just keep going until it's nicely covered. So I thought I'd give you just a quick update whilst the parts at the back there are drying. I think they're on about their 3rd coat now. What I'm doing is I'm doing 1 spray of paint, leaving them to dry, and then turning them over, painting the other side, and each one of those is a coat on each side. So what I've done here is this is the main handle of the vise and the lead screw that goes on the inside, and I've decided for this that I've covered the lead screw aspect because that shouldn't be painted because it's internal, and it left the outside dome and the handle itself. Now I've decided that for this restoration I'm going to leave a little bit of history in the vise, and I'm going to leave the outside bar as it is, just to show some of the age and really give it some history to it beyond just how old it is in general, but I thought that'd be a really nice touch. So I've covered the this part in masking tape and the ends just in paper just to hold them, and then I'm going to do the same thing, which is just spray paint, leave to dry, turn over, spray the other side. So I'm just going to take you with me here and do a little bit of a close-up. So on this last pass, just see if I can get the camera to focus, on this last pass of spray paint on this side, I rather stupidly left the spray can pointing in one place and just gave it a quick squirt. But as you can tell from the difference here in the paper, if you don't do a line and you just leave it in one place, it creates a lot of paint in one area. So what I'm worried I've done here is made it too thick, too fast. But we'll see how that comes out in the next few coats. Okay, so I've just brought you back. I've done about 3 or 4 coats on each side of these parts in the Hammerite paint. And I just wanted to bring you back because I've realised I've made quite a few mistakes whilst doing it, and the most notable of which is, you can just about see it on this piece here, the leftover newspaper that's on the handle. That is where I didn't quite leave it long enough to dry between coats, between turning the parts over. So I'm just going to have to retouch up these parts ever so slightly. I'll just show you. The same thing also happened on the handle, and there's a few little white spots down here. But I'm just going to respray them a few more times, give them just that extra bit of a coat to make sure they're secure, and then I'm going to move on to painting the other bits. So for the main part of the vise moving jaw, I have masking taped off all of the important surfaces, so that's the top surface and the space where the jaw's plates will go. Everything else has been sanded down and dusted down, ready for painting. I'm still going to be putting this on newspaper because I have no intention of painting the underside, because the underside here is the wearing surface. Okay, so I just wanted to do a quick little update on where I've got with the parts. So most of the parts now are pretty much painted. I want to do one or two more coats on the larger vice parts, so the jaws, just to make sure, because they're the bits that can take the most beating, that they are well and truly covered. The rest of the bits are looking okay. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus. Ready for removal. So the paint is still just a little bit tacky, so I'm going to leave them as they are for the moment. But then all I'm going to do is unwrap them and start assembly. The first bit to go back in will be the quick release mechanism. I'll assemble that because it's a sub-assembly, and then everything will be ready to be thrown together. I recommend leaving it quite some time between the last layer of paint, or the last coat of paint, before you actually start doing anything on them. The can suggests an hour, but I'm going to leave it a little bit longer than that, just to make sure I don't chip it or scuff it. I've already got a few dings on the paintwork that I'm a little bit disappointed at, but it'll bring some character to the vise. So we're back working with the vise. Where I left off last time was I removed some of the wrapping from here, and now what I'm going to do is begin reassembling the quick release mechanism, and come and watch along. Just grab the stuff that I need. Should have done this beforehand, really. So that's the spring mounting onto the quick release arm. And now I will be 100% honest, and I have forgotten which way round this metal plate goes. So I'm going to give it a guesstimate, and I'm going to hope that I got it right. But I could equally get it wrong, so I'm just squeezing down the spring here to allow this to go into it. And I'm going to make an assumption that it goes this way round. There's a little recess here for the screw to go into. Get that first better, so now I got the screw in the thread. Okay, and that is the quick release mechanism done. Okay, so I can't find my tub of grease. I don't know where it's gone. I must have put it somewhere in the house move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and assemble this dry and then grease it at a later stage. So I'll just point out the places where I would put grease, but mostly on this run here, as well as these wearing surfaces, a tiny bit on these two spots that the weight of the jaws go on, and a little bit around here. That would probably be about it. It's just a shame I don't have my tub of grease with me, but nevertheless I will crack on and get going. So it would help if I put this in the right way, wouldn't it? Okay. So that's the quick release mechanism in. Next, the jaw. There we go, it's just getting stuck a little bit on that quick release mechanism, but that's nothing to worry about. Okay. Next we'll put in that. So again, so that would be greased and put in, and what I might do is I might grease it from the back side and just take out this. Make it just that little bit easier. Relocate the jaw. Excellent. So I've just kind of got everything just sat in here a little bit now. So this plate goes on here and it stops the quick release from, well, rotating any further than it absolutely needs to. If I'd have thought about it, I could have also put copper grease on some of these bolts. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm just going to get this one in so I can free up my other hand. So this is the retaining plate, I don't know if you can really see it that well, that holds the quick release from sliding too far. I tend to only put copper grease on on threads that I want to stay still for a while but also come out again. I find it for some things when you don't quite want nylock but you want something to hold it in place, copper grease is excellent for that because it will hold it steady and it will stop the threads from gunking up until such a time that you want to undo it, and then it should come out nice and smoothly without snapping any threads. So here we go, nice bit of copper grease, and I'm just going to dip it. You can either dip or put it on your finger, either way works. All that matters is that you're getting it on those threads so you can just about see. Got just that extra little bit of shine on it, which is all we want. And then I'm going to take this, and with any luck, it's going to go straight in the hole. That if I used the right screwdriver, wouldn't it? There we go. So that's going to slowly bite its way into the thread and kind of pull this casing plate into line. So now that the project is finished, this is always a good point to go back on reflection. I did notice that the video file for the last one got cut short, so I'll just fill in on what I did. After screwing in the two screws on this side that holds this kind of plate on, you can just about see it here, that hold this plate on to the main vise which has the quick release handle. I then kind of put it back upright, and that was about it because of the way I'd assembled it. All that needed to happen was this plate was screwed on and this jaw was already inside the housing, so it's ready to go. And that's it, so now it's finished. It's a good time always to go back and do some reflections. There is still some future work that I'd like to do on this, such as getting a new set of vice jaw plates, because these ones are very well used to say the least, as well as when I get hold of a grinder, going through and sorting out that top face, so it's just that little bit neater. The other things that I learnt from doing this, which I'm kind of hoping you guys can avoid the same mistakes, is the main housing of the vise. I'll just wait for it to focus. The main housing of the vise here is a slight different shade to the rest of it, where it didn't quite get as many layers of paint, and you can just tell from looking on the side there, it's just a little bit more patchy than the rest of it. The other thing I learned from this was that the screws that came with it, I'll just grab them here, these ones here, whilst a lot more heavy duty than the screws that are currently in there, I don't have an Allen key that can fit in them. They're very odd size, none of my Allen key sets had the right one, so I've had to put in smaller screws, so that's definitely something that I'd look for in the future. The other things that I didn't quite do so well on this is the painting on certain parts and not leaving it long enough to dry. It's a mistake I make all the time. Oh, wait for it to focus. A mistake I make all the time when I'm doing spray painting, and it always leaves just that little bit of newspaper. I thought I'd avoid it this time, but clearly not. And that's about it. The only other thing that maybe to mention is I should have spent a little bit more time really getting into those layers of metal, so it doesn't quite look as patchy, but that could be part paintwork, could be part grinding.